In a scathing op-ed published in Washington Post, Joe Scarborough wrote, "The Republicans who promised to be the cure for political extremism have metamorphosized into a band of radicals who present the greatest risk to American democracy since Civil War." Joe held up a mirror to the current Republican Party. This is not the Republican Party that we had in 2000 or in 2008. This is a completely different beast altogether. Everything that the party accuses the other side of doing, everything that the party has said is wrong for the country, everything that the party said must never be done, are the exact things this party is doing over and over. Accuse the other side of stealing the election, then do everything to steal the election. Accuse the other side of radicalism and turn your own voters into radicals. Accuse mainstream media as fake news while using right wing media to pump as much fake news, conspiracy theories into mainstream consumption. Accuse the other side of having no fiscal responsibility and then pile up the debt and increase the deficit when you are in power. Accuse the other side of radical policies while using executive orders to behave like a king and send aides to say that the power of the president can never be questioned. Send people in Michigan to chant "Stop the Steal," asking for the counting to be stopped, while also sending people in Arizona to chant "Count all the votes." Ask Russia publicly to find Hillary Clinton's emails and say the Democrats are the ones who are working with Russia and China to undermine the United States. And here is Trump deploying the time tested Republican strategy: commit fraud and accuse the other side of committing that fraud which you are committing.
Hanukkah party.
I understand a lot of congressmen and women are joining, a lot of people are joining, because they can't allow this to happen. You can't have a country where somebody loses an election and becomes president.
Of all the nonsense that this Trump GOP has done, the worst has been their out in the open effort to steal the election. Thankfully, there were some people with backbones inside the Republican Party itself who stood up. Despite the partisan appointment process, the judiciary also stood up and thwarted the coordinated effort to overturn election results. Not just one or two, 18 attorneys general and 126 House Republicans had signed on to the Texas lawsuit, which was deemed unworthy of even a hearing by the Supreme Court. The GOP said there was so much fraud in this election, but they were not even able to prove fraud that could toss out 100 votes in an election that had 160 million votes. Imagine that for a moment. No evidence to throw out 100 votes out of 160 million votes. Then they took the constitutional gambit at the Supreme Court, arguing grievous injury was caused by the way elections were run in 4 states. The case, as expected, was thrown out. So, what does the GOP have to show for all its efforts? Biden has still got 306 electors certified in his name. He is still the man with more votes than any president ever elected in the history of the United States. He is the third man since the World War to relegate a sitting president to a single term, the only man in the history to defeat a president who spent more than $1.2 billion on his re-election campaign. The GOP does not see the writing on the wall. If $1.2 billion is not enough for a party to retain the presidency, then the game is as good as it is over. It is right there in front of them to see. But just like an ostrich, they have buried their head in the sand and show the 73 million votes that Trump got as proof is that they can win. No, that's how high the ceiling has gone for you to lose. You can go as high as 73 million votes and still you will lose, is the message. Because the other side had beaten you by 7 million votes this time and they are looking good to pad up that number by a few more millions thanks to the GOP strategy to stay in the hunt to find more white men without a degree. Now, how many Republicans believe that this election is rigged? 61% of them. If you consider the highest favorability rating Trump ever had in the 4-year term, which is 46%. So, what is 61% of 46%? 28%, which means less than 30% of people in America think the election is rigged. This election proved that educated men and women have already drifted away from the president and voted for Biden. A lot of these people are lifelong Republicans and they voted for Biden at the top of the ticket and for Republicans down ballot because they believed getting rid of Trump is good enough and the Republican Party is needed. But what they have gotten now in return? The entire GOP has backed Trump to the hilt, arguing the election is rigged. If 30% of the people believe the election is if 30% of people believe the election is rigged, then there is 70% of people who believe it is not. So nearly a quarter of the voting population identifies itself as independents, and Biden increased his share within this group by a massive 12 percentage points. Trump forced the independents to embrace Biden, and now they are all watching what this Republican Party is doing. What message is the current GOP sending to them? Sending to independents, educated and informed Republican voters, and women. It is sending a message that the entire party has gone nuts, and the GOP is running further and further away from all of them through its toxic embrace of violence and threats. GOP's embrace of violence has already turned the party into an untouchable for moderates and independents, and they are not going to come back unless the GOP reinvents itself. Angered by Georgia GOP officials not helping the president to overturn the results in the state, the right wing sympathizers have posted the address of several local officials in the social media platform called Parler. Imagine that. What about the families, what the kids have to go through? Do you think it was just a coincidence that suddenly people show up at governor's house or in front of homes of these election officials just to chant? No, it's not. Do you think it's a coincidence that former Trump campaign manager Steve Bannon wanted Fauci and FBI director Christopher Wray to be executed? Was it a coincidence that Trump campaign lawyer Joe DeGenova wanted cybersecurity chief Chris Krebs to be taken out at dawn and shot? Do you think it's a coincidence that Trump asked Proud Boys, a group that's known for its violence, to stand back and stand by? None of this is coincidence. If you look at authoritarian regimes around the world, killing dissent and increasing the threat level for people who speak against the government will always be their top priority. And this GOP engages in that process so shamelessly. This election has proved to us that this beast can be tamed and its threats can be nullified, and we can fight against GOP's authoritarian tendencies and still win. Everything that Trump touches dies is slowly becoming true. This GOP will die a sad death, and a new GOP will have to come up and replace it. We just don't know when and how, but I am sure it's going to happen. Thanks for watching. If you like, please subscribe.